Most people in the world are content to stay as first or second level maggots, and they establish their own little area, and they crawl around there, and that's fine. And the guys that become 10th level maggots are really big wheels.
That's David Suzuki in the 70s referring to people as maggots. He's since changed his speech. Now he refers to us as bacteria in a test tube. That's his shtick. Well, it's not surprising that someone who thinks that we're just morally the same as little critters would say, hey, no more immigration to Canada, even if he himself was once the subject of painful xenophobia, being interned in a Japanese internment camp in the Second World War. Well, this is not news to you, my dear viewer, because, of course, we did a show on this 2 weeks ago, but the fight has now been joined by Canada's immigration minister taking David Suzuki to task for saying Canada is full. You immigrants, stay out. And Jason joins us now from Calgary. Hey, Minister Kenney, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Ezra.
You know what? I think that there's room for a healthy debate about the number of immigrants. Frankly, in tough economic times, I'm not sure if it makes sense to bring in cheap labor. There's questions of welfare, and these days there's questions about cultural absorption, especially with honor killings. But that's not the argument that David Suzuki's making. He's saying we are physically full. He says he finds it disgusting we still let people in. What do you say to him?
I think you're right, Ezra. I do think it's legitimate to have a debate about what's the optimal number of immigrants to come into Canada. But Mr. Suzuki is saying that basically no immigrants, except perhaps some refugees in an emergency situation, should be allowed in. So what I read his comments as saying is to virtually eliminate, or basically eliminate, regular immigration to Canada. Now, again, you can argue over numbers. Should it be 250,000? The Globe and Mail says we should let in 400,000. The NDP says 500,000. But to say it should be zero is by definition an extreme view.
Here, let me read to you from his comments. He said this in a French newspaper called L'Express. He says, I think that Canada is full, too. Even though it's the second largest country in the world, our floor space is reduced. Our immigration policy is disgusting. And he goes on to say he particularly doesn't like the fact that we take the best immigrants from the world. Apparently, he thinks we should take, I don't know, the worst immigrants. It's very strange. What do you make of the fact, Minister, that David Suzuki said this to a foreign newspaper and not here in Canada? Do you think he knows that what he's saying is a little bit creepy?
I can't get into his mind, Ezra. All I can tell you is that his remarks are by definition extreme. And I have to say this. I think that if a prominent conservative figure who had his kind of profile were to say anything even remotely like this, they would be run out of town on a rail. They would be stigmatized, marginalized, mocked, fired from any media involvement that they have. This would be called xenophobia and bigotry. But I do think there is a profound double standard at play here, that apart from you, I'm aware, and one fellow at the Globe and Mail tweeting about it, and I guess Chris Elliott, the National Post, blogging. Apart from that, there's been no mainstream media coverage about this at all, and I find that deeply disturbing, because I tell you, as Minister of Immigration, I see part of my role as explaining to Canadians why we need the energy, the talent, the hard work of newcomers. And that's why, by the way, the rest of the world looks at Canada's immigration system as something of a model, because most of the immigrants that we select on economic grounds, we choose precisely because of their human capital, because of their capacity to integrate, because most of them find good jobs, work hard, create wealth, start new businesses. He's opposed to all of that. And he's basically telling these people that they should go home. And to say that Canada, the second largest landmass in the world, is full, as he says twice in this interview, is quite frankly nuts.
Now, let me read the second part of his quote. This is to that French newspaper called L'Express. He says, that does not mean we do not have a responsibility to those who struggle to survive elsewhere, but there is more room. However, Canada should always open its doors to those who suffer oppression or from an emergency. In the 1970s, when we welcomed 50,000 boat people from Vietnam, I was particularly proud to be Canadian. Well, I mean, that's fine, but for him to say only take refugees, we're all full up. It's weird coming from him, especially since he was one of 4 kids, and he has 5 kids himself, and 3 houses and a jet-set lifestyle. You know what I think it is? I think it's a form of Malthusianism.
Yes,
it's named after Thomas Malthus, where he says, oh my God, we're going to run out of stuff, so we can't have more people. Oh, except for me and my family. Don't you think?
Could I just make a point about this, Ezra, which I find really peculiar? Because Mr. Suzuki is a professor, a scientist. That's what his public reputation is based on. But yet clearly these sentiments are informed by a radical version of Malthusian demographic theory, which has been completely and totally discredited for at least 200 years. I mean, the very premise of Thomas Malthus's theory that as population grows, resources shrink, we won't be able to sustain population growth, has been disproven over and over again. We can see it in the world today, where there's more arable land, there's more agricultural production, there's more clean water, there's more resources because of the application of technology, notwithstanding population growth. So I don't know why this fellow has a reputation as some kind of infallible scientist when he's dredging up a joke of a discredited theory from the 18th century to say that we should lock Canada's doors, only let in a small number of refugees, and basically say to all of these wonderful, hardworking, talented, educated immigrants who want to build a brighter future in Canada that they're not welcome. Let me tell you, there's a secondary high school, a new one in Brampton, Ontario, called David Suzuki Secondary. That's what the school board called it. And the vast majority of the students there immigrated to Canada with their parents. Ironically, he wishes they didn't come to Canada because he thinks Canada's already full.
That's a great point. And you made that tweet. Let's show it on there. You've engaged in a bit of a Twitter war with Suzuki. Let's show that comment you made about Brampton School there. Now, do you think that David Suzuki will engage you? I find that he actually doesn't like debating. I find he likes to give speeches with only pre-screened questions. He hates media interviews that are not, basically tongue baths. Has he engaged you at all since you started poking at him yesterday?
No, and my point is not to poke at him. My point is that when I see someone make what I think are outrageous anti-immigrant remarks with a tinge of xenophobia, I think it's my responsibility, whether that's coming from the left, right, or center, to denounce it. And I would, encourage those people who are closely associated with Mr. Suzuki to do the same. Liberal MP Joyce Murray was endorsed by him in their last leadership election. Does she agree with David Suzuki that Canada is full? Is she happy to have received the endorsement of someone who has made the most anti-immigrant statements of any high-profile public figure in Canada that I can recall? Or will she and other fellow travelers of Mr. Suzuki denounce this extreme anti-immigrant sentiment that he is giving voice to?
I got one more hypothetical to throw at you. Let's say some old white guy, I don't know, Don Cherry of the CBC had made this statement on Hockey Night in Canada. Do you think for a second he would be suspended? There would be calls to fire. He probably would be fired. Well, you have another aging old fossil named David Suzuki. He's 77. But because he's Saint Suzuki, he can say, we all know that Don Cherry would be sacked the minute he uttered such words. In fact, anytime he just has a patriotic nativist approach to foreign hockey players, he gets it. But David Suzuki is saying no new people, and he's still a saint. It's not just party. It's not just liberals and New Democrats. It's the media party here, including his employer, the CBC.
Ezra, there are cranks on the far right who give expression to hardcore anti-immigrant sentiment, and I denounce them whenever I hear sentiments like that. But this guy is not treated like a marginal crank. He's treated like a major public figure who has a significant role in Canadian public discourse. To come out and say that Canada is full, that we should accept no more immigrants, that our immigration policy is sickening, it is irresponsible and frankly toxic language. And I hope that he'll reconsider it and retract these remarks and maybe say to those new Canadians that I meet with every single day that we're glad they're in Canada. We hope that they do well here.
Jason Kenney, good word stand on. Thanks for joining us today, folks.